Welcome back, everybody. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the .bind method in JavaScript using two primary use cases. So, first thing that we'll start with is what I consider to be the slightly less interesting use case for it. Now, if you're not familiar with .bind, it's in a similar family as the .call and .apply methods. All three of them allow you to do one main thing, which is set the context for a function. Now, the context is the value of the this keyword, and explaining context is a bit beyond the scope of this video. So if you're not familiar with context, actually you don't have to worry about it for this video because we're not worrying about setting the context in this particular video, but that's something that you can look into if you're not familiar. The big distinction that makes bind different, though, is that call and apply execute a function, evaluating it and giving you a value. So if you execute or if you call .call or .apply on a function, you receive a value. Whereas if you call .bind on a function, you will receive a new function with the context set. So that's a big difference. You return a new function, not a value. It's not being evaluated. Just the context is being set and the variables are being set. And this allows us to do two interesting things. The first of which is expressed in this code, which is dealing with mutable state and keeping a live link to that state as it changes throughout the course of the program. So let me explain the code here first. It's pretty basic. We have a function called getFiles, and it takes a path, uses the fs module from Node, and I apologize for using the synchronous versions. It's just much less clutter for people who are just trying to understand the code. So I wouldn't normally use synchronous ones, but for this example, this is why. And it calls the synchronous version of readdir, which returns an array of every file in that directory, so the path that was provided. We then have an add file function, takes a path, creates a timestamp, and in the path that was provided, writes a file with the timestamp applied, basically so that it's unique. And it doesn't give that file any content, just an empty string. So what we're doing down here then is we are calling getFiles in the reports directory and assigning the returned array of files to all files. We then console log all files, we add a file to the same directory, and then we console log all files. Now, if we execute this code, we will see that we get the same file returned to us before and after adding a file. And that's a problem because right now, let's see here, I was pretty sure, yeah, my notifications are off. All right. Apparently, Facebook doesn't care if my notifications are off. What happens here is that we are getting a static cached version of the file array that was in that directory. So there was a file1.txt at the time that this line of code was executed, and then we added a file. But then we just looked at that exact same file, or that same array again, which has not received the updated file in it. And there's a couple different ways, or at least a couple different ways that we could fix this problem. One of which would be to call getFiles every time. And with just this being ./reports, that's probably not a big deal. We could console log getFiles ./reports, and then down here, console.log getFiles./reports. The problem here, though, would be if this was a much longer string. So maybe it was ./reports/customers/2017/June/customer XYZ. And then maybe it took more than one parameter. Maybe it also took the type of file you wanted. And then you had to write that every single time. It's really convenient having all files be the only thing that you have to reference every time you want an updated version of all those files. And so the way that you can do that with bind is actually pretty interesting. You can just call .bind on the get files function. We'll just pass in null because we don't care about setting the context for this. And then you pass in all your arguments. In this case, it's just path because that's the only argument that get files takes. Now, it will return a function. So not a static value. Remember, bind does not evaluate this function. It just returns a new function with those settings applied. So now we can execute all files. And if we run this again, now we have the updated file that we ran, that we got last time we ran the program. So we've started the first time with file 1. Last time when I ran it, we added this file. So that is the starting point for this most recent run. And then after we add the file, we get a new console log with the updated list of files. So it's just a much more readable, easy to manage way of writing functions that you have to call multiple times that maybe have multiple parameters and is just a pain to write over and over again. This allows you to store some parameters or some arguments already in that function. So, like I said, that's one potential option. Another option, or another use case, not option, just get rid of all this empty space, is dealing with functions that are not curried, but that we want to partially apply. If you're not familiar with currying and partial application, I have an entire video on it where I go much more in depth. Basically, though, what we want to be able to do is call add3 and store one value in it. So maybe we just want to set the value of x. So we could create a function called add12to. We would call add3 and then pass in the value 12. This would then mean that if we called add12 2 and let's say 3 and 4, or more likely if it was a curried function, 3, 4, we would get 19. Right now we'll just get an error because this doesn't actually make any sense to the program. But because JavaScript functions are not curried. Now if JavaScript functions were curried, this would be just fine. And you could, of course, just say, well, why don't we just curry this function? And the easiest way to do that is with lambdas. So in JavaScript, those are arrow functions. So if we get x, y, z, and then return x plus y plus z, this is now curried. If I get rid of that guy, and run. Oh, calling it, but I'm not console logging it. That will make it awfully tough to see. There we get 19. So this is a curried function. You could just say, well, if I want to partially apply a function, like we did here, I could just curry it. Well, that works just fine, unless, of course, this function isn't in your code. So add3 is maybe in some sort of super secret maths API, and you don't actually get to touch the source code. You just get to consume it. So somewhere in your program, you have something that's like, let's add3 equals require maths, and that's all you get to do. You just get to use it somewhere in your program, and it's not curried by default. They did not curry it in the API, so you just have to deal with it. .bind actually allows you to get the benefits of partial application without using a curried function. And you do it by simply calling .bind, passing in null, and then whatever argument or arguments, comma separated, they do not go into an array, that you want to partially apply. So now if I run this, oh, actually, I'll have to put these together. If I run this, then, assuming I haven't done anything wrong, we get 19, which is very cool. So this allows you to then reuse or get any of the benefits that you might want out of partial application from non-curried functions. And just so that you can see it, this would be kind of goofy to do in this case, but if you did want to chain a bunch together, then you can partially apply a partially applied function. And you'll want to execute that last one, because if you call .bind, remember you're just going to get a function back. So you want to actually execute it and evaluate it with the last value that you pass in. Got nan. What did I do wrong? Oh, forgot to pass in null. So our context was 3. And we get 19. All right. So again, just to show you what I meant there, if I call .bind on this, then I'm just going to get a function back. See? Three values all bound to our function. And then if I were to execute it, then we would get 19. But it just makes more sense to do that with the last value that you pass in. Like that, which is what I did last time. So there you go. 2 use cases for bind. Have you ever used it before? I haven't had to at this point, but maybe you will. Let me know if you have any interesting use cases for it that maybe I haven't thought of, or if you found this useful at all, let me know. If there's something you want me to cover more in depth, either with .bind or maybe covering .call, or maybe I missed something in my partial applications video. Let me know. I love the feedback. I've been getting some good feedback from everybody, so keep that coming, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye.